Let's talk exposure. Today I'm going to walk you through the step-by-step process on how to expose your Ikonart stencils. So before you expose your stencils, you need to print your artwork. This video is part of our Ikonart 101 series where I take you through every single part of the stencil making process, broken up into individual videos. So we already filmed the video on how to create artwork for beginners, as well as how to adjust your print settings and print your artwork. So I will link our entire Ikonart 101 series below so you can see those videos as well. But the main thing is you want to make sure your artwork prints nice and dark. So we do include a sample piece of artwork in every single kit. This is in your quick start packet in your kit. So when you print your artwork, just hold it up to the light. You want it to be nice and dark. You don't want to be able to see light through it, and compare it to the sample that came in your kit. So you want to have similar densities or darkness of ink as the sample that comes in the kit. Having dark artwork is extremely important because you need your artwork to completely block the light during exposure. So this is a very important step. Before you even start exposing your stencils, you want to make sure your artwork prints nice and dark. So once you have your artwork printed, you're ready to make your stencils. And as you can see, I'm working in regular lighting right now, but I am not working in front of a window or in bright UV lighting. UV lighting can pre-expose your stencil film, which will make washout very difficult. So if you do have a bright window in front of your sink that you're washing out on, either shut the shade, or if you don't have a shade, just expose your stencils at night. Our stencils come in this protective black bag, and you do want to keep the unused stencils sealed in this bag at all times. You don't want to leave your stencil film out in any lighting for an extended period of time. So I'm just going to take out my stencil sheet that I want to make out of my bag, as well as the cover sheet that comes in every package. And then I'm going to seal my bag right away so that the stencil film that's in the bag stays protected. And now I'm ready to expose. So in order to expose your stencil, you want to put the shiny side of your stencil film down and the soft side up. And then you want to put your artwork on your stencil film the way you want your final stencil to look. So if there's text on your stencil, you want to be able to read that when you place your artwork on top of your stencil film. Or if it's just a design, you want it to be the way you want your final stencil to look. Then you want to use this cover sheet. So there's 2 of these cover sheets in every single package of film that you receive, and they're very important for exposure. You want to make sure there's no dust or dirt on the cover sheet because that will block out the light during exposure and it can cause pinholes on your stencil. So just make sure your cover sheet is clean, and then you want to place it on top of your artwork and stencil film and rub down really, really well. This step is very important because you want to make sure there's a good seal between your artwork and your stencil film. If there's any gap between your stencil film and your artwork, then light can get underneath your artwork during exposure and it can cause undercutting. Undercutting is when light gets under the edges of your artwork and shrinks your artwork almost. So you're not going to notice that on big, thick designs, but on very fine lines, you will notice it, and it's very important. So just always make sure that you are really rubbing down really well on that cover sheet before you start exposing your stencil. All right, and then you're ready to expose. There is a switch on the cord that you can just flip on and off, but I actually use my remote, my Beastron remote, every single time I make stencils. I love this thing. It just turns on and off my light with a remote control. And then I also use my timer. So I just have my timer set to 35 seconds because I'm using inkjet film. That's our recommended exposure time. Our recommended exposure time for laser is 30 seconds. And a little note about exposure time: you never ever want to go over on exposure time. There is no reason to ever expose longer than the recommended times. Every once in a while you'll see in our group recommended to maybe expose a little bit less time. So the reason for that is if your artwork isn't printing dark enough and it's letting light through during exposure, if you expose for maybe 5 seconds less, you're giving that light less of a chance to make it through your artwork. So sometimes you will see people expose for 5 seconds less. However, keep in mind that then your stencil is not going to be as strong when you're washing it out. So you want to be a little bit more gentle with washout, and then maybe post-expose for a little bit longer as well. So we always expose for our recommended time because our artwork is printing nice and dark. But if yours isn't, you may need to adjust that a little bit. Just try 5 seconds less. I do not recommend going more than that. So once that is all set, I have my light ready to go, and I can just turn on my light and turn on my timer and expose that stencil for 35 seconds. So what's happening here is when the light turns on, it is all the areas that are not blocked by your artwork, the light is hardening those areas of the stencil. And all the areas that are blocked by your artwork are going to remain soft. So the light is not hardening those areas. So that means when you go to wash out your stencil, the areas that were blocked by your artwork that remain soft will wash away with water, while the areas that hardened during exposure will not wash away. So that is how the stencils work, which is why dark artwork is so important, because if light gets through your artwork, it can start to harden the stencil underneath that artwork, and then washout is very, very difficult. So that's pretty much all there is to exposing your Ikonart stencils. A few other things I wanted to mention are mirroring your artwork. You'll see that mentioned every once in a while in the group. Mirroring your artwork is completely optional. Some people see better results with fine lines when they mirror their artwork. And when you mirror your artwork, all that means is when you print it, you're printing it backwards so that this is the ink side of my film, so it looks like it's printed backwards, so that when I'm exposing it, the ink side of my printed artwork is touching the coated side of my film, and it's just giving you better contact between that stencil or the artwork and the stencil film, which is why it can help with fine lines. Another thing I wanted to mention is that you don't need to use a full sheet at once. If you have a smaller stencil that you want to make, you can just take your sheet out of the bag, measure the size you need, cut it down, and then put this part back in your bag, seal it up, and you can use it another time. So you don't need to make a full stencil all at once. If you just need to make a smaller stencil, cut your sheets down, no problem. These exposure tips are exactly the same for both our blue stencil film and our purple textile film. You expose both films exactly the same way. The only time you would expose different is if you were exposing our larger 12 by 18 sheets. Then you're going to want to raise up your light about 6 inches, and then exposure is a little bit different. We have a separate video on that. Other than that, if you have any questions, let us know in the comments, and make sure to head over to our Ikonart 101 page or playlist in order to see all the videos in this series.